Hello and welcome to BW TV. It's the month of November, that time of the year when BW Businessworld gears up for its annual B School issue. And we're here at IMT Ghaziabad today, where I'm joined by its director, Dr. Vishal Talwar. Dr. Talwar, thank you so much for your time in talking to us. And for our readers, who read us continuously, Dr. Talwar spoke to us back in October. I'm sure that our readers have covered that in our October issue. But as we prepare this special annual issue on B School, it was vital that we try to understand a bit more on what's happening in this ecosystem. And so, Dr. Talwar, just to bring a fresh perspective to our conversation, let me frame this question slightly in this way. Given the change our business landscape has seen in the last 4 years and the pace which will intensify in the next 5 or 10 years, if today you're given a chance to redesign a course, a curriculum for business schools, what would it focus on and why?
Well, I think that's a very loaded question, in my opinion, because there's a lot that can change, and it's already changing. One of the first things that obviously is changing is the fact that there's far more technological appreciation, technological learning happening or coming or getting integrated into the management curriculum. Now, whether it is neuro-linguistic programming, whether it is generative AI, whether it is some of the data science-based courses, these are all courses which have over the last few years got integrated into the curriculum of a management to be graduate, right? But it's not just that. I think I would like to see courses which are not just about technological understanding and human-machine interaction, right? That's another course that possibly can be created. But I would also like to see a lot more courses around self-management, a lot more courses around holistic development, a lot more courses around being able to understand your own selves more than anything else. How do you have difficult conversations? How do you have communication, not just with people who are working with you, but with let's say all forms of management in the organization? Right. How do you do all that is something that doesn't always become part of any business school curriculum normally, right? So those are things that are important. And one big piece, and something that we are obviously looking at, and we know it's a challenge, is this whole idea of climate and sustainability. Now, that's something which has to get integrated, and it has to be taken seriously. It's not a course, just like you have a course and you get a good, let's say, mark or a percentage or a percentile, but it's has to get integrated to the DNA of the institution. It has to be taught across subjects, because the leaders who are coming out of business schools now are people who will be making major decisions going forward, which will affect the planet, it will affect society, it will affect geographical location, it will essentially affect our own existence as organizations, as societies, as people.
In our last conversation, we spoke about AI. Your focus back then was where would it impact in the job ecosystem, right? Probably the entry level. You elaborated quite well. But if we talk about its integration in the curriculum, how exactly it can be integrated well, how students can use it well. There's not a large consensus on this as to what would be the best way to integrate it in the curriculum. And a connected question to it would be that the traditional methods of assessing students, there are concerns that if you go by those traditional methods, they're misusing AI. So where does that change needs to come?
Well, I think change needs to come, and in a sense, learning needs to come on both sides, right? So it's not just about a student using certain AI-related tools. It is also about the faculty and the institution understanding the capabilities of these tools. I think, as we see with many other things, it's usually the student generation that is able to adopt something faster. So that's basic adoption theory, wherein you have some early innovators who adopt a particular product or a service first, and obviously you have students who do that. To make better use of the positive aspects of, let's say, artificial intelligence will require us as institutions to understand it better, right? Its capabilities, it's how we can optimize on it, how can we make use of it, in the larger sense, At times, there's a thought that the AI or generative AI is being used for, let's say, some not so very encouraging reasons, right? Writing, let's say, essays or papers or whatever else. But the fact remains that there's so much more that can be done with it. Can we just say that it's being used for limited purposes and thus it may not be beneficial? It has huge benefits. But for these benefits to manifest, the onus is on the institution to understand it better, integrate it better, create guardrails, right? So there's a recent situation where, wherein you can see that there is some legal cases or whatever else that have come along. So having guardrails are very important. What can be used, how much it can be used. How do we assess in that case? Do we use the same measures for assessment? When people are using AI-related prompts or using generative AI, using ChatGPT for getting some solutions. Right. So I think how do we look at them? How do we assess them? How do we integrate them? How does it help in the learning process? And how does it help in learning outcomes? Is fundamentally very important. Right? I do keep asking around, and how do they tend to use this kind of technology in the classroom? So very interesting answers. So there's a faculty out there who encourages people to use it, but there are aspects that need to be covered. Why are you using it? What's the rationale? What prompts have you used? What answers did you get? What do you think about the answers? So what's happening here is, if you reflect on it in great detail, what's happening here essentially is that you're making the students think. So the tool is not being used just to be able to replicate something. It is also being used to evolve as a learner, right? Or also it is being used to create certain hurdles which get you back into normal learning, right? So there's a lot that can be done, but I think our understanding of it has to be done. Our sensitization has to be done. It has to be brought into instructional design. It has to be able to, we have to have workshops, we have to have our own seminars to be able to understand, what are we staring at.
Let me stick to the students only, especially in terms of their consumption patterns. They have short attention spans. In that respect, their media consumption has gone up. How do you see these massive online open courses? What sort of partnership is your institution, having? If you could share some insights on that.
Obviously, these courses are very useful, right? And they've come along because there was a need to be fulfilled, especially during COVID times when we couldn't travel anywhere. And of course, in the process, you saw a lot of very good valuation for such organizations which enable this, right? Remote learning or blended learning or learning at home. And then we saw some fatigue setting in, right? Wherein people wanted to come back to classrooms, people wanted to be, in the physical environment. We fundamentally believe it's a combination that is useful, it is important, because learning has to be continuously engaging, right? So if you're physically present in the classroom, then you are going elsewhere, you're going at home, you're going somewhere else, right? So I think a kind of a combination of using technology to be able to create a more consistent, seamless learning experience is where the MOOCs that you talk about, where a lot of technology-related learning that you talk about can be an advantage. The jury is still out whether just MOOC-oriented learning or just kind of looking at those as a form of learning fulfillment, whether that's enough, or whether a combination is something that is important, wherein you have to have the opportunity to discuss with other people, with a peer group, with some mentor, what you learn. That enhances the learning piece. But I think there's an advantage to having a blended and a hybrid approach to learning, and I think we welcome it. We use it, in fact. I think we do engage with online learning providers, right? Whether that be open certifications and everything else. Right. But I think the better way of utilizing it, and the more, let's say, longer term benefit of this can only be derived if you are integrating it into the curriculum per se, right? If those are being looked at as a standalone additional top-up certificate, yes, it will have some uses, but how do you integrate it into the normal curriculum? That is where the challenge is, and that's where I believe a lot more of the benefit is.
Let's talk about the startup economy in our country. We've seen a plethora of new internet businesses popped up, startups in the last 5-7 years. But at the same time, with some of the, business school graduates going on to become founders, having such startups, uh, have faced corporate governance issues. Uh, some have not been that sustainable when it comes to their balance sheets. Uh, how do you think about having the essence of ethics and that fostering of a culture of building sustainable businesses among the students? What's your take on this?
Well, I think it's important because at the end of the day, it's important that our students learn the ability to be entrepreneurial, right? To be able to dream and aspire to become, job givers than to be job takers, right? That's something that I'm sure you will have read about, you will read about. But I think those results will not come that quickly because, the whole business school model, is it's a 2-year program or even in some cases a 1-year program. It may not necessarily give you time enough to be able to create, let's say, an MVP product, to be able to test it, to be able to, deliver it out into the market, to trial it. But I think what it can help you do is to, create certain aspiration. What it can help you do is to be able to have a base of people who think like you, and in the process you get the confidence to be able to start something for yourselves. A business school, what are the advantages of a business school, right? And this is something when I compare it to, let's say, a tech school only, right? A tech school is very good with, let's say, creating a product or a technology. A business school is very good with the strategizing of it, the scaling of it, the growth of it, making a commercial success of it. And I think that's something that is the advantage that a business school is able to provide, the learning it provides. I think it's more around the business school model, currently, where a lot of the students are predominantly looking at job-related outcomes, are predominantly looking at corporate career-related outcomes. But we see a lot of change there, right? We see that there are a number of students who come to us at the IMT Innovation Incubation Center, and they ask about, okay, I have this aspiration, this is what I would like to do, can you help me out? And we have a system for doing that. So what is good is the fact that more and more students are coming to us, more and more students are being experimental, more and more students are being able to take up that challenge, right? And I think it's a matter of time where, a lot more students will, take up the effort. I think it's, what does the institution do to enable that to happen, right? Does the institution provide a safety net? Does the institution provide, let's say, a deferred placement policy that if you just by any chance you fail, then we'll be there to take you, we'll be there to help you out in a way. A lot of those things will further increase the confidence, right? But, have there been startups from us straight away after graduating? Yes, we have. Do we have startups 2-3 years after people graduated, did their first job, and then started looking at creating businesses? Yes, we do, right? So some of the big startups currently, in the country and even abroad are actually IMT alumni who've started that. So I think it largely depends on what you want to do. It largely depends on how the business school environment is able to help you dream bigger. Those are our responsibilities.
Let me touch an important aspect of mental health. In your previous answer, you mentioned that how students see business schools, necessarily being linked to job-related outcomes, having a good corporate career, and somewhere down the line, it also becomes a source of anxiety when they're, during their course. How do you see the mental well-being, evolving for students, and especially again related to job outcomes? Because you see, a lot of students who may not be in a top tier colleges, they have this concern that companies are not coming, recruiters are not coming to them. So it's really tight for them. If you could share some word of advice on grappling with this.
You're right. I think it's something that institutions such as ourselves have started looking at in greater detail in the last few years. And I think it's the reason why it happens is a combination of the things that you mentioned, as well as the generational change that we have, obviously seen. Different generations react to things differently, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Different generations have different expectations. Different generations have a different approach to their life, their work, and that's perfectly fine. There is a recognition of that, that different generations, have to be treated differently. You have to have processes in place to ensure that people are feeling more comfortable, people are feeling at peace with their own selves, with what they do, right? And of course, IMT Ghaziabad, we have a system here of care. We have a system here wherein you have the wellness counselor, right, and the growing team that is able to help the students go through this journey with themselves, work with them, talk to them, mentor them, guide them whenever required, so that their whole experience and the journey in the place is smoother, right? Yes, this whole idea that you mentioned about work, studies, out of classroom activities, and then of course student expectations, student outcomes. This all creates a certain, what I would call as expectation, certain pressure. And it is important that institutions like ours, are able to help shape the direction as well as give a more guided experience to the student, including from a wellness perspective. Yes.
Right. Very quickly, what are your thoughts on online MBA? How well it has kicked up in the last 4 years, especially after the pandemic? And if it has not reached the level that you may have in your understanding or you would have expected, where is the gap?
Not just about the online MBA, it's about online learning as a whole. It could be synchronous, it could be asynchronous, it could be, remote. All this is helping a country like ours to reach a certain stage. Now, so if I look at it even from a new education policy perspective, right? What is the objective that the government has? The objective the government has is, can I increase the base of people who get into higher education, right? So whether it's 27, 28% right now, and in the next 10, 15 years, if I want to make it 50%, right? You really have to be able to build infrastructure which is virtual. You have to be able to build infrastructure which is physical. Both has to be built up, right? So this whole online piece has been able to and will be able to contribute in that direction. It can provide the scale that a country like India is looking for. Now the bigger question is that, how is it manifested? How is it implemented? How do you ensure that the learning happens in the right manner? The outcomes are achieved, right? Your course design is done in such a way that it's not just a replication of what happens in a physical space, right? It has to be treated differently. It has to be done differently. Your credits have to be delivered differently. You have to have a very different, let's say, base of faculty who are able to deliver, right? And it's not necessary that those who deliver very well on the physical side, on a physical space or a physical environment, are able to do exactly the same in the online environment. So that means that a lot of retraining also has to happen, right? A lot of sensitization, workshops, trainings has to happen so that justice is done even in the mode. But I believe that having the online MBA is fulfilling a particular need in the Indian context. It's even at the undergraduate level, nowadays you have courses that are delivered in the online mode. It's fulfilling something. Now it's more a question of, are the learning outcomes being achieved? Those are things that we have to work together on.
To you, you mentioned in your first answer as well about sustainability. Coincidentally, as we are speaking, COP29 is happening in Baku. You've recently, your institute being ranked on this metric in one of these global rankings. How important it is for institutes at large to focus on this aspect, reducing their carbon footprint and contributing towards sustainable development?
We're in the process. We are an institution like some of the others who are building the leaders of the future, right? And it is imperative that we are able to provide an education which is not just for their first job, but it is for a bit of their life as they go forward, right? And as you go forward, What do you see? As a business leader, you'll have to make a lot of decisions that impact you, impact people around you, it impacts society at large. And if you don't sensitize, if you don't make them realize that there's much more to decision making than possibly profitability or maybe an EBITDA or a PAT or whatever else, but how do you achieve that, right? What process are you following? Is that leading to a certain kind of a situation? Is that leading to some kind of detriment, possibly somewhere else? What do you do about it, right? I think it's our responsibility as an institution to be able to ensure that we just don't do lip service in terms of maybe one course here and there, but we are able to make the student experience what it will be like as you go forward, right? How does a certain section of society live, right? How do they go about their own business, their own life, right? What can you do about it, right? So I think it is about ensuring that institutions like us are able to weave this experience through projects, through sessions, through integration with the other courses that are taught, right, from a functional perspective, so that when they are exiting from the institution, they exit with a more wholesome, holistic perspective on, how, what, and what is it that will be expected of them, for wider society as you go forward. So whether it is about climate decisions, whether it's about sustainability, whether it is about this whole idea of looking at the bottom of the pyramid or working with the bottom of the pyramid, a lot of these things, can be done at institutions like us. We have the infrastructure, we have the resources, we have the mindset, we have the faculty, right? We have the network to ensure that the student is able to go through that experience, so that later on in life, their decision making is not just around certain limited or aspects, but it is also around this whole idea. And I keep talking about this, that business leaders are not just expected to lead organizations from a commercial perspective, they're also expected to be healers, right? In a way, they have to, be able to ensure that the fissures and the cracks are healed. There, people have different reasons for their existence. A lot of decisions have to be made so that there is more equilibrium in society. So I think that's something that IMT, through its SSR program and other courses, for example, managing hybrid organizations, is able to build up on.
Okay. I know I've said that it was the last question, but I can't help but ask you this. I know in the past we've had you, talk on this a lot many times, but in 1 minute, if you would have to sum up your word of advice for students who will be entering the job market, it's really tough outside. Analysts, industries, they're seeing a slowdown. What would be that word of advice to be, exhibit that resilience in such a job market and, tackle these ever-changing business landscape?
Right. Well, I think there are things that you can control and there are things that you can't control, right? So when you talked about the business landscape, you talked about macroeconomic conditions, or you use the term slowing down.
Yeah.
I think those are things that are out of your control, right? But what you can do is you can prepare better, right? To be able to wade through these different phases of the economy, right? How do you do that, right? You do that by exactly what you said, resilience. You can do that by being agile. You can do that by being creative. You can also do that by believing in yourself, right? That you're able to achieve what you want to achieve. But I think all this, is something that I'm sure, people have spoken about. All this will only work if you're prepared enough, right? If you focused enough in the classroom, if you focused enough, in the learning, if you focused enough in the kind of, let's say, curriculum that you were engaged with over a period of time, right? I think the foundation as well as what you build on it, both have to work in tandem, right? Your belief will come, your resilience will come, your agility will come, your creativity will come, your ability to, let's say, maneuver situations will only come when your base is strong. And where do you get the base? The base is through better preparation, right? So that's the advice I would like to give.
Dr. Talwar, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Always a pleasure talking to you and, helping us in understanding, identifying the pulse, what's going on in this ecosystem and what better the student should be prepared for. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you.